My name is Cassidy Moore, and I am 30 years old. And I want to tell you about the Tuesday afternoon I discovered that my best friend of 11 years had been sleeping with my boyfriend for 4 months and had also been draining $32,000 from my bank account for 8 months, and what I did about both of those things over the 18 months that followed. I want to start with Riley before I start with anything else because Riley is the center of this story. And understanding who she was to me for 11 years is the only way to understand the specific weight of what she did and the specific patience of what I built in response. Riley Chen had been my best friend since we were 19 and assigned to adjacent rooms in a college dormitory in Chicago. She was quick and funny, and the kind of person who made every room feel more interesting than it had been before she walked in. We moved into an apartment together at 22. We survived the years that people survive together when they are building their adult lives from scratch, the bad jobs and the worst relationships and the specific chaos of being young and under-resourced and ambitious. We came out the other side closer than we had gone in. By the time I was 28, I had a career in financial analysis that I had built carefully across 6 years and that I was proud of. I had an apartment I loved. I had Marcus, my boyfriend of 2 years, who was calm and smart and who had, I believed, the specific quality of person who understood honesty as a baseline rather than a strategy. I had Riley, 11 years, birthday dinners and emergency phone calls, and the specific intimacy of knowing someone so well that their face communicates something before they have finished the sentence. I found out about Marcus and Riley on a Tuesday afternoon in March when I came home early from a business trip and found evidence that I was not supposed to find. I will not describe the specific evidence because it belongs to a private moment that does not require public detail. What I will tell you is that the evidence was not ambiguous and that the timeline it established was 4 months. 4 months. While I was traveling, while I was calling Marcus from hotel rooms and texting Riley about how the trip was going and coming home to both of them behaving normally in the specific rehearsed way of people who have been practicing normal for 4 months. I sat with that for about an hour. Then I opened the joint account I still had with Riley from the years we had lived together, and I looked at it because looking at things is what I do when I am trying to understand the full picture of a situation. What I found required me to sit with it for considerably longer than an hour. The joint account had been set up when we were 22 and living together. When we moved into separate apartments at 25, I had transferred most of what I kept in it to my primary account and maintained it as a shared fund for occasional split expenses, the kind of thing you maintain out of trust and inertia rather than active management. Riley still had access. I had not removed her access because removing it would have required a conversation that implied distrust, and I had not distrusted her. The account activity I was looking at now told me that I should have distrusted her significantly sooner than March. Over 8 months, beginning the previous July, Riley had made a series of transfers from my primary account through a transfer authorization she had set up, each one below the alert threshold I had configured, each one timed at intervals that prevented pattern recognition without close examination. 32 transactions, $32,400. 8 months of my best friend, moving money from my primary account into the joint account and from the joint account into her personal account in increments designed to be invisible. I am a financial analyst. I have spent 6 years analyzing financial patterns professionally. I had been so thoroughly not looking at this account that someone who understood exactly how to be invisible to a person who was not looking had been successfully invisible for 8 months. I sat with the account records and the evidence about Marcus and the specific combination of those two things for the rest of that Tuesday afternoon and into the evening. I did not call Riley. I did not call Marcus. I did not call anyone. I ordered food because I understood that making decisions while not eating was a structural error I could not afford. Then I opened a new spreadsheet and I started building. Not a confrontation plan, not a list of things to say, a documentation architecture. Every transaction, dated and sourced, every piece of evidence from earlier that afternoon, dated and preserved. A complete record built by someone who understood how records work and what they require to be useful. The spreadsheet took 3 days to complete properly. By the end of it, I had contacted an attorney, a financial crimes specialist named Patricia Walsh, who had the specific direct manner of someone who has seen every version of this situation and who reviewed my documentation and confirmed that what Riley had done was wire fraud under federal statute, prosecutable, documented, and extremely difficult to defend against. Patricia asked me what I wanted to do. I said I was not ready to decide that yet. She said, "Take your time." I said, "How much time do I have?" She said, "The statute of limitations is generous and the documentation is solid." I said, "I will be in touch." Then I called Marcus, not to confront him, to end it. The call lasted 11 minutes. I told him I knew and I was not interested in discussion, and I wished him well, and I meant 0% of that last part. He tried to say something. I said I would not be speaking to him again, and I ended the call. Then I did not contact Riley at all. I let the Tuesday and everything it had produced sit in my spreadsheet and my attorney's file while I decided what patient actually meant. The 18 months that followed were the most productive months of my professional life. Not because I channeled the anger productively in the inspirational sense that people describe when they are trying to reframe suffering as fuel, but because the specific clarity that arrived after that Tuesday was the clarity of a person who has had every distraction removed simultaneously and who now has complete information about where she is and what she is working with. I was working with myself, my skills, my savings, my professional network, and a documented case that was sitting in Patricia's office, gaining interest while I decided when to use it. 3 months after the Tuesday, I was offered a promotion I had been working toward for 2 years. I took it. The title change came with a salary adjustment and a project portfolio that put me in front of senior leadership on a regular basis, and that I worked with the focused, complete attention of someone who has nothing else going on that she has not already made a decision about. 6 months after the Tuesday, I began building what I was calling internally the second position: a side business, financial coaching, and advisory work, evenings and weekends, built on the professional credibility I had accumulated across 6 years and the specific knowledge base of a financial analyst who understood exactly where people underestimated their own resources. The side business grew faster than I expected because I was good at it and because I was giving it the kind of complete, uninterrupted attention that it had not had access to when my attention was being divided between work and Marcus and the social infrastructure that had surrounded both of them. By month 12, I had 17 clients. By month 15, I had 31. By month 16, the side business had generated more revenue than my main job, and I had made the decision to treat it as my primary focus going forward, which required conversations with my employer that produced a consulting arrangement rather than a severance conversation. By month 18, I was doing what I had built in privacy, and what I had built in privacy was generating significantly more than my previous salary and had a trajectory that required planning rather than hoping. The total value of what I had built across 18 months, conservatively calculated, exceeded $100,000 in a combination of salary increases, equity in the side business, and the resolved settlement that I am going to tell you about now. I called Patricia at month 14. I said I was ready. She said, "I have been waiting." She said, "The case is airtight." I said, "I want civil, not criminal." She said, "Why?" I said, "Because criminal requires me to be in court and because what I want is recovery and documentation and her understanding that I know what she did and chose to handle it this way." Patricia said, "Civil recovery plus a cease and desist and a formal acknowledgement." I said, "Yes." She said, "I can do that." The settlement process took 3 months. Riley did not contest it. Her attorney apparently advised her that contesting Patricia's documentation would produce worse outcomes than settling. She settled. Full recovery of the $32,400 plus legal costs plus damages, and a formal acknowledgement of what had occurred that went into a civil record. I used the recovery to seed the advisory business. I did not spend it on anything else. It became the foundation of something that had been built partly because she had taken it. I want to tell you about the moment Riley found out I had built the business because the finding out is the plot twist in this story, and the plot twist is what I have been building towards since paragraph 1. Riley and I had mutual friends from the years we had known each other, people who knew both of us from college and from the apartment and from the years that followed. I had not publicized the settlement. I had not posted about the business in any way that would reach Riley specifically. I had been operating in the separate lane of my life without crossing into hers deliberately. What I had not accounted for was a mutual friend named Jess, who worked in the same general professional sector that I had moved into and who discovered my business through a professional referral network in month 17 without knowing, initially, that I was the person she was looking at. Jess called me on a Thursday. She said, "Cassidy, is this your business?" I said, "Yes." She said, "How long?" I said, "About a year and a half." She said, "I had no idea." I said, "I know." She said, "Riley does not know." I said, "Riley and I are not in contact." There was a pause. Then Jess said, "I might have mentioned it to her." I said, "What did you say?" Jess said she had mentioned that a financial advisor she had heard good things about had the same name as me. She had not connected them. She connected them now. She said, "I am sorry." I said, "Do not be sorry." I said, "It is fine." Riley texted me the following Monday. The text was not what I expected. I had been prepared for anger or defensiveness or the specific performative innocence of someone who believes offense is the best defense. What I received was a message that had the texture of someone who has been sitting with something for a while. She said, "I heard about your business." She said, "I owe you more than I can say, and I know that." She said, "I am not texting to ask for anything." She said, "I just wanted you to know that I know what I did and I know what you built after it and I think about it." She said, "I am sorry, Cassidy." I sat with that text for 2 days before I responded. Then I typed 3 sentences. I said, "I know you are." I said, "The settlement is handled and the documentation is filed and there is nothing else between us legally." I said, "I wish you a good life and I mean that." I did mean it. Not warmly, but genuinely. I had spent 18 months building something that had made the $32,000 into something considerably larger and had made the Tuesday afternoon into the beginning of the most productive period of my life. And I could not in honesty describe what Riley and Marcus had done as the worst thing that had happened to me, because the worst thing that had happened to me had produced the best work I had ever done. That is not a comfortable thing to say, it is the true thing. Marcus reached out once, about 14 months after the Tuesday. His message was brief and had the quality of something he had started writing many times and had finally sent before he could revise it again. He said he was sorry. He said he had not been who I deserved, and he knew that. He said he hoped I was okay. I was considerably more than okay. I did not respond. What I want to tell you about the 18 months is not the revenge narrative that the word revenge suggests when people use it about situations like this one. The revenge narrative suggests a plan built around making someone suffer, a campaign designed to produce visible consequences for visible wrongs. What I built was not that. What I built was a life, specifically and deliberately and from scratch, in the space that opened up when two people who had been taking up significant room in my existence were no longer in it. The $32,000 was theft and it was recovered legally through a process that left a documented record and cost Riley significantly more than she took when legal fees and damages were included. That part was justice rather than revenge. Justice is available in documented cases with solid attorneys. I had both. The business, the clients, the professional trajectory, the income that exceeded what I had been earning in combination with the losses Riley created, that was not revenge. That was what I was capable of when I was not dividing my attention between people who were using it badly. I think about that sometimes, not with bitterness about the years before the Tuesday, with the specific clarity of someone who now understands the difference between what I was doing with my energy before and what I was doing with it after and what that difference produced. The savings I have now are considerably more than they would have been if the Tuesday had not happened. The business exists because the Tuesday happened. The professional reputation I have built in 18 months is built on work I did during the specific focused period that the Tuesday created. That is the plot twist nobody expects when they hear a story about betrayal. The plot twist is not that I got her back in a satisfying, direct way. The plot twist is that what she did was the most expensive mistake she could have made and the least expensive thing that ever happened to me because what it cost me in pain, it returned in clarity. And what I built with the clarity turned out to be worth considerably more than what she took. Jess told me once, about a month after the Riley text, that Riley had asked her what I was like now. Jess said she had told her I seemed focused and calm and genuinely satisfied with where my life was going. Jess said Riley had been quiet for a moment. Then she had said, I expected her to be angrier. I understand why she expected that. She had not understood that I was never going to give her the anger. The anger would have been the thing she could track and measure and feel connected to. The thing I gave her instead was nothing. The productive nothing of a woman who took all of the energy that anger would have consumed and built something with it instead. That is the story, not the drama of a confrontation. The math of what happens when you take the energy that betrayal generates and put it somewhere that compounds. Drop your city in the comments. Hit subscribe. I will see you in the next one.